Hey everyone, you are listening to the Commitment to Growth podcast. This is your host Mariana speaking, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the show. Hello, welcome. Hola, ¿cómo están? A little Spanish for you today. That means hi, how are you? It is so lovely to have you here today, and I want you here however you are today, in whatever state you are with whatever you have today. I want all of it because I have such a special conversation here for you today. I am so excited to share it with you finally. But anyways, I hope you're well before we get into it. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope that your end of the year is coming to a close. Again, it is like mid-November 2022 as I'm recording this, and it's flying by. And I just hope that you are taking time for yourself and being mindful and being present and taking time to be in the present and to relish in what the present is offering you right now instead of, looking ahead to the new year or the holidays, which even though that's all super, super exciting, uh, relish in what you have with you today and right now. And I really think that this conversation is all about that. And I am so excited to bring it to you today because it's something a little bit different that I don't think I've had on the show before, but it's definitely a side that I have been meaning to and really, really want to bring more to the show, given that I am now a licensed personal trainer. Fitness is a huge part of my life. If you've been here long enough, then you've heard me mention it multiple times on the podcast, how it's just such a vessel for personal growth and personal development and self-discovery. And I could not think of two better people to have this discussion with today. The two incredible women that I am bringing to you today are Amy Smith and Emma Skaug, who are two of my closest friends that I had the privilege of meeting in university at the University of Victoria, where we all attend and we are all in the process of attaining our bachelor's in kinesiology, which, for those of you that don't know, is essentially exercise science, exercise physiology. It's the study of human movement in all its forms, and such a fantastic degree. I absolutely love it. So I had the beautiful privilege of meeting these two incredible women there amidst our mutual passion for fitness and exercise and studying that and helping people become more fit and what that looks like in a holistic way, among many, many other things. And let me tell you a little bit about both of them so you get a little bit of background. So, Amy is a powerlifter by trade. Recently, as I record this, recently watched her powerlifting competition, and Amy won first place in her weight category. So let's just give her a little snap there, everybody. She absolutely killed it. It was so awesome to watch. She's a power lifter. She is an aspiring strength and conditioning coach. She is also a spin instructor with the most amazing playlist, Death by Stationary Bike, if you happen to look it up on Spotify. And she's also a wonderful poet. She's an artist, among many, many other beautiful things. And Emma Skaug is the guide for Canada's Paralympic triathlete, Jessica Tuomela, and she has been in triathlon since 2014, so 8 years now. She's a competitive athlete. She competes in cyclocross outside of triathlon, and one of the most beautiful, beautiful souls out there as well. So very well-rounded individuals, and I was excited to bring them together for this conversation, not just because these are chats that we have had in our own time, very passionately in our own conversations around the table between classes, that I just thought would make such a perfect episode, but truly because everything that was talked about in this episode was what I wish I had heard when I started taking up athletics competitively, recreationally, but also just in general. I think that it's so easy to lose ourselves in the narratives that surround fitness today about, how it has to be all about suffering and how so much of it has to do with body image and weight loss. And it's so guilt ridden when it comes to, quote unquote skipping a workout and having a cheat meal, and so much of the things that were said today made me feel, even at the stage in my life and my relationship with fitness where I feel like it is purely for my enjoyment and is purely for my own personal growth. um I feel like so much of this conversation just made me feel like I had the permission to let myself indulge in fitness, to let fitness be something that is enjoyable, not just filled with suffering. And of course, there's something to be said about pushing yourself and what that feels like and how that contributes to your mental resilience. And you absolutely should, but it doesn't always have to take place in the negative form of suffering. So, we are going to dive all into that today, giving yourself permission to enjoy athletics as an athlete, what it means to work smart, not hard, what it means to train within different seasons. So, whether you're in competition season or an off season, what that can look like in terms of balancing social life, academic life, work life, relationships. Um, Untangling yourself from the notions that surround fitness culture today, and getting yourself to a place where you are a more intuitive athlete that listens to your body, that listens to your body's cues, that listens to when you're injured, when you're hitting a threshold, or when you can actually push harder. All of those things are going to be talked about today, which is super exciting because we've got the endurance perspective from myself and Emma, as myself as a runner, Emma as a triathlete, and we've got the higher intensity weight training background from Amy. So we are sandwiching our perspectives, we are sandwiching our experiences, and bringing you something so special and so near and dear to my heart. And I cannot wait to show these two women off to you and show my friends off to you, because they, with everything aside of the incredible people that they have just made such a grandiose addition to my life as two of my closest friends, two of my closest confidants, and they're just beautiful people. And I know that you're going to feel it in this conversation. So, with all that being said, if you can't tell, I'm really excited. I will get the ball rolling here. So, without further ado, everybody, here are Amy and Emma. Before we do so, one quick note that I do want to say is that this podcast was recorded on the land of the Wasanish peoples, particularly the Sartlip, Sayout, Saikum, Pakwachin, and Malahat nations, who continue to have an ancestral relationship to the land to this day. I come as a settler and I come as an uninvited visitor to these lands, and I acknowledge my positionality among these lands as a privileged settler who had to do no work to be here. And I acknowledge that that gives me an immense amount of privilege and an immense amount of responsibility in acknowledging what not having to fight for these lands means, and how I can use that privilege to return it to the hands of the people who it rightfully belongs to. And on to the episode. Here are Amy and Emma for you. Alrighty, I am joined by two incredible powerhouse of women, Amy Smith and Emma Skaug. Say hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hello, Emma here.
And these two women I'm so excited to have on today, because this conversation has been brewing for a very long time, and I feel like we've been meeting to sit down and have it, and we finally made the time amidst our busy schedules. And it's a topic that is very near and dear to each of our respective big, amazing hearts. So, without further ado, I'll let them introduce themselves to you. If anybody would like to go first.
Okay, Emmy's pointing at me.
Go for it. Go for it.
Emma here. Obviously at UVic with Mariana as well, but I'm also in kinesiology, entering in my 5th year, although we're going to be taking 5.5 years to get my degree done. Not unfortunately, we're taking our time. Anyways, working on my honors thesis right now in the concussion research lab, and long term maybe I'm thinking about either going into research in exercise physiology or maybe occupational therapy. We don't really know at this point.
Absolutely.
In sports, I'm a triathlete. I've been in triathlon since 2014. But the latest endeavors that I'm doing is I work with the paratriathlon Olympic team as a guide for a lady who is in the visually impaired division of triathlon.
Yes, she does.
And yeah, so that's been a journey that's been a lot of fun. I feel like it's going to come up a little bit later in the conversation, but that is me.
Yes, we watched her on TV at the Commonwealth Games this summer, not to flex
She's on
or anything.
Triathlon Canada.
Yes, she is. She's on a
Like-
magazine, everybody. Come on.
Yeah.
We're just showing her off a little bit. Show yourself
my
off a
God,
little bit.
you
It's
guys.
okay.
Oh my God, you
It's okay. All right, Amy.
Yeah, okay, and then my name's Amy. I know these two girls from UVic as well. We're all in kinesiology. I am in my 4th year and just about finished.
Mhm.
And kind of in the future, I'm looking at pursuing strength and conditioning. So working with higher level athletes in a training aspect, everything other than kind of their sport specific skill-based training. So you're looking at everything other than everything to get their physical needs of the sport up to par. So that's kind of my interest, hoping to do a master's with that. And then my sport background is powerlifting. I did kind of more general lifting for quite a few years since I was 15. And then just in the last couple of years have narrowed it into powerlifting a bit more. I actually have my 2nd competition coming up in a little less than 2 weeks. So super excited for that. Kind of like the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of sport capacity from triathlon, where it's very, very high volume. Powerlifting is very low volume, very high intensity.
Yeah, which I'm not. I don't max out at those same intensities.
No, neither do I. Neither
Yeah,
do I.
this is gonna be a really fun dynamic here.
Yes.
What are the principles? What are the differences? What are the similarities here?
Yes.
It's gonna be good.
Which is also why I think it's so cool that we got this group together, because I think that all of us, I mean, Emma and I are mainly endurance based, Amy is powerlifting based. So
But you have that powerful background with gymnastics.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a bit of that as well. But I think that it all ties together within those perspectives as to, you know, what does training at different volumes mean for each of us? Like, what does recovery look like? So that is kind of the cusp of this conversation that we wanted to have with you today, because it's been a topic of conversation amongst us a lot, especially coming from exercise science backgrounds, where what does it mean to work smart, not hard? Because we feel that athletics has taken this turn of, you know, only if you're working at this high intensity all the time are you worthy of being an athlete.
Specifically like fitness industry and like that kind
Exactly.
of yeah.
Exactly. So I'm excited that we all have different takes and backgrounds on this. So that being said, I'll ask you both, whoever wants to take a stab at it first. As an athlete, what does it mean to you to work smart, not hard? And what does that look like for you?
Do you have any thoughts to start us off, or want me to kick us off?
You take it away. You got your good notes.
I do. She does. There's so many things to unpack here, Mara. Oh my gosh.
I know. We're all brewing.
Seriously.
Volcanoes erupting. Yeah.
Holy. But yeah, I wanted to think a lot about this because it's a simple few words, work smart, not hard, but there's so many underlying layers and so many societal influences that have been coming out around what it actually means to be proficient in what you do and be motivated and be dedicated and be hardcore. And what does that look like in terms of actually getting results? Because in the end of the day, the only thing that matters is when you toe that start line or when you sit down to that test, how do you actually perform? And so I think I would like to narrow it down, at least when I think about working smart versus working hard, is the couple of words that really come to mind are being present and being intentional with my time. I think about it in terms of there's pillars in my life that all 100% require attention, and those are proper sleep, good nutrition, school, training, and then there's like my friends, my boyfriend, my family, and house life, cleaning, laundry. All those things need to get done, and there's a lot of pillars, but they're all essential to who I am as a person and the big goals that I'm chasing. So I think about how do you be present how do you be present with your time and intentional in what you're doing? Because if you're not fully present in the moment and intentional with every minute of your day, you're not going, I don't see how you can possibly balance all these pieces in a way that's actually effective.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge.
Yeah,
that's
and
huge.
intentional in a way that isn't like doing the absolute most in every single minute, but intentional in both work and rest. Like having the balance. Because I think sometimes people think that they have to be mindful or intentional in the way that they have to like plan every minute out, and that's the best way to be intentional. But intention is sometimes I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to stare at the wall because my brain needs to rest. Like for me, I need that time.
Yeah,
you know?
that's huge. It's about being super aware of yourself and your current state of energy and your current state of mind. And I think also being brutally honest with yourself of where am I at right now on an energy level, on a focus level, and what am I actually capable of?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
if I'm in a super hyped up, really focused, good mood, not necessarily good, but I'm present and I'm focused and I've got a good amount of energy, that's a time that's really appropriate to do something that's hard, whether it's a hard training session or some hard research or a hard assignment where it really takes a lot of mental energy. Versus if I recognize that I'm just wasted from a hard session or a hard day at school, is it useful for me to sit down and try and do homework when I'm not going to absorb any of it? Like, probably not.
Yeah,
it's probably helpful at that point maybe to do some laundry or the dishes or some cleaning or some busy work that's just some data input. Because if I try to do those hard tasks when I'm in a state that I'm not actually able to absorb the knowledge or absorb the training, is that actually a present and intentional way of using my time? Is that a smart way of using my time?
That's so big.
Yeah, and I think like just hearing you talk about it, I feel like there's two ways to look at this kind of like work smart, not hard. There's like the idea that more intensity is not always better. Like there's intensity for better outcomes, but there's also just intensity for the sake of intensity. And I think a lot of people in their kind of like novice training think that more intensity is always better. But we see that that's not the case, that we actually see different adaptations based on different intensities, right? And not just max intensity for everything. That's going to look different. That's going to create different adaptations, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But then on the other hand, what you're saying, kind of like different pillars of things too, like there's also like work smart, not hard, in the sense that it's less so about intensity, but how much extra little things you worry about too. And so it's like,
can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. I'm just kind of like formulating this in my head. Like, there's like the kind of foundational things to focus on. There's, you know, that analogy of like the big rocks in your cup versus like the small rocks. You got to put the big rocks in first, or they're not going to fit, kind of thing. It's the same thing where like nutrition and sleep and proper recovery and training, those are all things that you need to have adaptations and stress management and all these things. But then there's all these little nitpicky things. And I feel like as kin students, we can sometimes get too excited about those things where it's like muscle fiber type differentiation and, you know, like specific physiological outputs and are my, you know, like electrolyte levels perfect and all these like supplements, all these extra things that if you don't, like, I think we can get too focused on all these little things that will give us that extra 0.1% of an edge, but we don't get the things that give us the main 20%.
Oh, yeah.
I'm snapping.
Yes. Have you guys seen there's like a trend going, I don't know if it's a trend, but I keep seeing these things pop up on my Instagram and I'm like, damn right. People be like, oh yeah, it's this creatine supplement and this like compression boot and I don't know, this other exercise or this other thing that I'm eating that's going to give me this extra edge. And I'm like, but are you sleeping 8 hours a night and eating well?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Like, if you are not sleeping 8 hours a night and taking care of your nutrition, do not talk to me about phosphocreatine supplementation. You know?
I feel like I really came into like my own kind of butting heads with this idea when I started working with my coach, where like I was like, you know, is the tempo for this right? Is like my grip width okay? Like, how did that look? Like, you know, all these different things. But then he was like, well, how much protein are you eating? What kind of calories are you eating? And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, you're so funny. Like, why, like you have all these extra little things that you're so meticulous about, but like,
your foundation.
Yeah,
is,
start on the, like, let's just talk about
That's
being
so-
consistent
Yes.
with your training. Like,
Yes. We don't give our bodies enough credit for like their adaptability. Like I think I
Yeah.
remember having this conversation not that long ago where I was like, "Do you take any pre-workout?" And you were like, "No, I just have coffee before." And Emma and I were like, "Yeah, we just drink coffee before." Which I mean, and to some degree is a, it's a stimulant, so like it wakes you up and everything.
I mean,
clears
pre-workout is pretty
your
much-
colon, as Emma and I like to call it.
man.
Real talk.
Real talk.
But like there's so much that we look to outside of ourselves to fuel our performance when it's really, like you said, just falling back on the foundation. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking enough water? Did you, is your relationship going okay? Like so much plays into that and we don't give enough credence to it. So
and I even want to touch on like the last thing you said of like your relationships and stuff. It's so interesting to see how stress outside of like not physiological stress, like your workout is a stressor on your body. It's a positive stress, but like stresses outside of that affect your training and your adaptation.
So
huge.
Huge. Oh my gosh.
It was cool to see like even with like some of the bikes teams, like with the rowing team, they were tracking kind of like mood and behavior and different things. Like they do a nightly kind of fill this in. And like we were talking to the coach in one of my classes and he was saying that, I had a guy he's consistently for like mood or stress, he's at like or like how he's doing, it's like a 4, it's not great, but that's consistent. 4 is a 4 for him. But then he tracked a few days of like a 1 or a 2 and his training was shit. The next few days he goes up and talks to him like, what's going on? Like you look pretty beat up. And he's like, oh yeah, my girlfriend and I broke up or whatever, something like that.
That's huge.
That is affecting his training and his output. Like that's something you have to consider too. Like when you're dialing up the intensity or dialing it down is like, how much other stress do I have in my life? Because then you're not going to be intentional with your time either. It's not going to have the response that you want it to.
Yeah, you won't have a clear head. You won't have the capability to absorb those things. I really like using the word or the words emotional capacity is kind of what I call it.
We talk about that a lot here.
And it's this idea of, I think it's there's like direct correlation, I want to say, between emotional capacity and stress. And like Amy just said, stress can come from actual physiologically working out, or it's that test that you're studying for, that conversation you had about finances. It's your living situation at home. Maybe there's some tension with your roommates. But I'd say like the bigger stressors is school and respecting how much effort and time and stress you put into working hard at school and doing well at school. And absolutely. I think it was one of the biggest lessons I learned throughout triathlon, and specifically switching over to the paratriathlon program, is my coach and the athlete that I work with are super, super observant and tuned into energy levels and energy levels in terms of like stress and anxiety, and not like, I'm really energetic or I'm really tired today, but like angstiness. And I'm very easily angsty, uppity person. I'm very much like on the move a lot. And I've used to have a lot of trouble kind of coming back to center. But in this role within sport, you can kind of fly with that if it's just yourself. It's not ideal, but you can make it work. But as a guide, when I'm taking care of someone who is completely blind, if I'm not centered and calm and controlled,
that's huge.
They can't trust that I'm going to do my job well. And if I can't do my job well, we can't execute the training session, and we are base level, we're worried about safety. So kind of coming into this environment and having them be really in tune with my levels of angstiness, I want to call it, really, and they would comment on it and ask how I was doing and what's going on. And slowly I started realizing that, wow, my levels are high all the time. I'm always running hot, and I wasn't even aware of that for the first 2 years here in university. Like when I moved here from Calgary for the first 2 years, because it was 2 years in the National Center before I switched to paratriathlon. And over time, it was just starting to become super observant of myself and what my triggers were and how I could come back to center and what can I do leading up to training so I don't show up stressed and anxious. Because absolutely, we can't do the job that we need to get done if I show up in that state.
That's so big. I want to hop back. There's so much I want to unpack there. But
oh my God. I spoke for a while there.
No. Don't apologize. It was all so valuable. But I want to touch on something that you said at the very beginning when you were defining what working smarter, not harder meant to you. And you mentioned, like, you had family, your relationship, your friendships, your house chores all built in there. And I think that that's so important, because I think that our society paints kind of the professional athlete lifestyle, in your case, to be this, you know, your athletics are completely separate from your life, and you have to completely separate the two, because if you lean more towards whatever isn't your sport, it's a hindrance to your performance. Or like you have to be super disciplined around the time that you spend, you know, at parties or with friends, because it could take away from the sport. And I think that, you know, we're seeing more and more now that having that completely separate distinction, call it, can hinder you more than anything, because you said, like, you need that support when you have a bad day of training, when you have a bad competition, like, you need that to fall back on. And also, you know, on a longer term scale, at one point you will not be able to be a triathlete anymore. You will not be able to be a powerlifter anymore. And what is your identity after that? So as two athletes, how do you, I guess, like, how do you see that balance, or like those aspects of your life outside of your sport fitting into and contributing to your performance?
Yeah, that's like a really interesting point, because I think in like previous conversations we've kind of talked about this idea of like feeling like you need to sacrifice everything for your one goal, and that more sacrifice to that equals more success, or faster success, or better success. And we've seen that in different people that, you know, like are very committed to this singular goal, that they cut out everything else because they see it as a hindrance. But I think it's so interesting that you made that connection, that it's not even just like a neutral party. It's actually something that feeds in and benefits your performance in your sport. Like, I think in that context of like, what are you sacrificing for your goals? Yeah, you will have to sacrifice some things, if nothing else, some of your time, some of your energy, you know, but what sacrifices are actually beneficial versus just sacrifices for the sake of sacrificing. Like, if you deny yourself everything except for that which contributes to your sport, you're doing yourself a disservice, because there are other people that are, and it could be sport, it could be career goals, like professional aspirations, academia, whatever your goal, whatever your passion is, or your dream. If you're sacrificing everything, there are still people who are putting out the same output and doing the same performance as you, that have left the other things in, that have left those relationships and the things that keep them feeling balanced. And they're performing the same level as you are,
if not better.
But they're going to have also a much more sustainable kind of career in that. And so you look at like the long-term goals of the athletes, and in S&C we talk about strength and conditioning. We talk about this all the time. It's like, what is like the long-term career like of this athlete? How do we keep them on a trajectory that they're constantly improving, where they're not just going straight up and then plateauing? We have this nice steady stream that over the long term they can perform well and move well, and they're not going to get burnt out psychologically, physically, you know, like that's huge. And there's some places that don't train that way. You look at certain like gymnastics kind of teams that, you know, they literally stunt these girls' growth so that they can be, you know, like childlike body to move, but then they are filled with injuries and problems in their bodies for the rest of their lives, all to just have this very steep peak and then plateau or decline for the remainder, you know. So you're thinking about in the long term, these things are going to fuel you so that you don't burn out.
Exactly.
And so like I don't know, just this idea of like sacrifice for the sake of sacrifice isn't really helpful. It's like sacrificing the things and committing to like your sport in a way that actually does produce better outcomes. And how much it's like a balance of like, how much do you want to singularly see this outcome without like getting rid of everything else? Because even just, but this sacrifice will make it better, make me do more, better, whatever, faster, stronger. But is that even worth it if you're still progressing at a slower rate, but still progressing?
Like, can you not stay an hour later at the party if it means that you only get 7 instead of 8 hours of sleep? You know, like, I hear you.
And like, I want to go into that too, and I really want to unpack that, like the word you said the word helpful, and I love that word because it's like I look at things as what's helpful to me right now, and in terms of staying like that one extra hour at the party. Also, I think there's a lot of balance there of like, what does your season look like? Are you in race season right now? Then you know what? Staying that one extra hour at the party, probably not a great thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh my God.
Right?
That's huge.
Yeah.
But are you on Christmas holidays, or you're in a lighter recovery, or actually no, not a recovery week. You need to recover on recovery week. But are you in an off competition season, and you're at a level in your energy where you're not kind of pushing the limit in training and in school, and you have the extra recovery space that, yeah, you can stay out a little bit later. Or are you in a place where you're really fatigued, you're really run down, you're really tired, you're on the edge of getting sick, maybe injured, you're feeling kind of burnt out? Maybe it's not great to let loose and party all night long, because that's probably going to inhibit your sleep. You're not going to recover and be able to absorb all those stresses on your body. But if you're not in that place of severe fatigue, then like, you probably have the space to be able to enjoy yourself a little bit more. And not saying, okay, I don't really like the words enjoy yourself, because not ideally, if you're working this hard in a sport, you should be enjoying yourself in your sport. But to take that, if you have this energy space to spend the time in the social situation, then use it. But I think it's all about that balance and being cognizant of where you at right now and what's going to be most helpful to you right now.
Yeah. And you know what? That actually totally reminds me of just like thinking about periodization.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Especially with high level athletes, periodization is so important.
Yeah.
And I think like when I first got into lifting and fitness and stuff, I had this concept that people, you know, like bodybuilders looked like they do on their competition day, like year round.
No.
And like people train, like the people who are training for the Olympics, they train the same way they did at like a week before the Olympics as they do the rest of the year. And that could be not farther from the truth.
I'm laughing because I feel like I also had that aha moment recently, and I was like, wait a second. Wait.
And that's so important. That's so important for like looking at these athletes who are absolutely ripped during their high level competitions.
Like they don't even look like that year round, because
they look like that for
it's
like
not
the
sustainable.
month.
It's surrounding.
It's so stressful. And actually, when you're in this really big, heavy, strength building, aerobic base training season, which is usually in the alpha competition season, like you're working really hard and stressing your body a lot. You kind of need a little bit of extra cushion if you want to handle that, because unless you're hitting your nutrition and your sleep and your recovery exactly perfectly every single day, which I can guarantee you're probably not going to do. We don't have the fitness trackers that are able to tell you exactly how much stress you're putting on your body every single day. You need a little bit of extra cushion, or you are going to get sick and you are going to get injured.
And what I was thinking too is like, I feel like periodization really applies to the rest of your life in the context of sport. So like what you were saying, like, if you're in competition season where you're getting really close to your race or your competition, you're going to be more strict with what you're making time for, with what you're like being slack on, versus saying, no, this is a solid, like this is a firm line. Because that's when it really counts, you know. But then you have the transition period after competition. You have kind of the more general physical preparation period where you're training, you're building, but it's a lot lower volume. It's a lot lower intensity. Where you have a bit more leeway to, like if your nutrition's a little off or you're kind of focused on other things mentally, you have more mental space. And it's almost like, I feel like this could really apply to a lot of other aspects of life too, that like, it doesn't have to be just a sprint all day, every day. There's like, you know, you have periods and seasons where you have more laxity around your schedule. And then you have other periods of time where there's more rigidity and there's more sacrifice, but it's not meant to be like that, like year round, you know?
I want to unpack, or not unpack, I want to talk about what you were just talking about in terms of like a framework, or like how I like to talk about exactly that periodization that you were talking about in terms of the changes in your focus and sport throughout the year, and the balance of life. But I had to think about it in terms of a balance that you have over a week and over a month and over a year within your life. And instead of thinking about sacrifices, I'm holding up quotes for all the listeners here, air quotes. Sacrifices, as we usually frame them, are saying things like, hey, I want to go do this thing, but I can't because of XYZ, which XYZ is usually related to other goals that you have. And I don't want to say that sacrifices never occur. It's huge in the sporting world that you can't make maybe large family events or birthdays or a certain holiday because you are held up training in this other part of the country. But in the general, more like microstructure of life and school and training and friends and family, I think looking at what aspects of your life and kind of like those pillars I was talking about earlier, like need to be nourished in order to let you be a nourished human being, not a nourished athlete, not a nourished student, but a nourished human being as a whole, is what are those things that you need to take care of and how do you take care of them over time? Sometimes within the week, you're going to be swayed towards that school focus, or maybe it's that athletic focus, or maybe it's that friends focus, but it's because that's the season. And right now you need to be focused on one of those things because it's exam season or it's competition season or it's holiday season. So, but then within the month, those same things can happen. Are you getting a balance of what you need from those pillars within that month? And then sometimes it's not even within the month because seasons last a little bit longer, but within the year, you have those times when you're nourishing different parts. And so where possible, I like to shift the wording of that from sacrifices to just shifting the balance towards what aspect of your life is taking precedence right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is super important. And understanding that, like, even as a professional athlete who is doing the sport 100% of the time and is maybe getting paid to do it as like their job and all, life throws ebbs and flows at you in your relationships, in your state of mind, in your stress level, in your recovery. Your body has different needs at different times. And because of that, you're forced to make that shift in energy towards different things, towards different people. And I think that segues very well into this next question, which I think we already kind of talked about how, you know, having that work smart, not hard mindset has helped you in life as well, like the periodization aspect and the ebbs and flows. But, you know, we were defining sacrifice, and I think that sacrifice has been tainted to be, I think there's a lot of guilt ridden in the fitness industry. And I think that a lot of, like, even the wording around skipping a workout, right? Like just the connotation associated with that, or like it's a cheat meal, it's a cheat day. Like there's so much. We're all shaking our heads because we're all like, but there's so much, like, we associate that having to decrease our volume or miss a run because we're tired or something is this failure. It is us being lazy. But and I spoke about this on an Instagram post recently, how there is something to be said about having the intuitive ability to listen to your body, and how that is very, very badass, I think, and says a lot about you as an athlete, because you're putting your health and your understanding that you can't put this 100% work output out all the time at the forefront of your training, at the forefront of your understanding and what your, I guess, contract with your sport is, I guess. So how, for both of you, do you feel like you've shifted out of that kind of guilt mindset around working smarter, not harder? And what did that journey look like for both of you?
Okay, I want to dive in right off the bat with a super, not even like science-y, but very straight up like question or thought process that if you are still struggling with this 100% intensity, I am scared to let go of this 100% intensity because I'm scared that I will stop making gains. Just think about it like this.
Yeah.
The act of exercising literally breaks down your muscles, causes inflammation within your body. It's you are not building yourself up. You are literally breaking yourself down. Once you stop exercising, and especially when you're sleeping, that's when your body actually responds to that damage, responds to that inflammation that you've created, and builds itself back up again. It heals and it becomes stronger because you've put this load and this stimulus on it, and it's like, oh, hey, shit, like, I need to be able to handle that next time. So it gets stronger. And then next time you can add more load onto it. You break it down again, and then you sleep, you recover, and then you heal, and then you can keep progressing upwards. So if you're going 100% all the time and you are not giving your body the ability to recover, to heal from that damage, it'd be like, it'd be serious. Like maybe you cut yourself with a knife when you're cooking or something. Oh my God, I should not say that.
No, that's okay. You're okay, it happens.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You somehow cut your knee open, and then you go and then you fall down and you keep picking at the scab and you never let that scab heal. Is it going to turn into healthy skin again? No, it's going to turn into scar tissue. And it's going to be less resilient and less strong. And that's the same with your whole body. Instead of actually getting stronger and faster, you're going to become weaker, less resilient, more injury prone, and more prone to sickness. So what we need to think about if we're talking about this 100% intensity all the time is, where's the recovery?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, muscles aren't built in the gym, they're broken down.
Yeah.
And then they're built outside of the gym.
I love that.
And that's so true. Like, I think just like from a more personal aspect, even like from this kind of like guilt intensity mindset, like I know for me that was really damaging, like especially when I was like a teenager. What started like for me as like a really like healthy pursuit, I was like, I want to be healthier, I want to be stronger. I'd like kind of originally started with running, and then I got into lifting and fitness and all these things. And I want to eat better, I want to be healthier, but it became this thing that like more is better, more like if I can eat the healthiest foods, I'm going to eat those. And if I can train more, I'm going to train more. And I was kind of just like feeding into all of this messaging that is disguised as like motivational and helpful, that says like, you know, how much do you want it? How bad do you want it? And I'm like, I guess I need to want it more. And and instead you're literally toning down your emotional, you're literally taking your inner voice that is telling you how you're feeling and how you're responding, and you're saying, shut the fuck up, I don't care.
You're invalidating.
How are you supposed to understand how your body is recovering and responding to training? How are you supposed to understand your emotions, your level of tiredness, if you're constantly muting your body, which your body knows best?
Well, and what happened was that I actually didn't see a lot of progress because I was overdoing it and I was under fueling for those goals. And then worst of all, I had this like mental obsession around it. Like I had a very like what I would call a disordered relationship with food, rather than like an eating disorder. But it was that I thought about food all the time. And that was like something that I needed control. And it was a source you could control. Yes, it was something I needed to control. And anytime I like fell outside of the boundaries that were unsustainable for my body, that I had created, I felt out of control. I felt guilt, so much guilt around it. And so I cracked down even harder, I'm like, I got to stay in control of this. And with fitness, it was the same of like, I wasn't seeing any progress because I thought that, more was better and I needed it to be, 100% all the time. And it was interesting that as I shifted towards more balance, where there was more freedom to eat how I wanted, and I didn't think about food as much. I didn't think about training as much. I didn't train as much. I actually made more progress. I made better gains. I had the body that I actually wanted when I stopped thinking about it and stopped making it this singular pursuit. So what do you think was a big fundamental switch for yourself there? Like, how did you shift from this very intensive, controlled mindset to taking a step back and starting to let that voice inside of yourself that actually knows how you're feeling? How'd you give the microphone back to that voice? It was a really hard shift to make because if you have this mindset that like more control is better and that losing control means that you're a failure or that you have something to feel guilty about, there's like, it's so hard to relinquish control and allow there to be some more leeway because you feel there's like shame around it. But I distinctly remember like because I think how I kind of gained control over food changed over the years, like in terms of different restrictions or like diets or even like fasting or things. And I just like distinctly remember this time. I think it was in like 2018, like I was probably in grade 12. In my car, I was getting to go somewhere and I just was like, I cannot keep doing this. Like I can't sustain this anymore. But at that point there was no like solution. I just knew that this like couldn't keep going. And for the longest time I didn't even acknowledge that it was like a problem, you know, because it's masquerading as healthy, you know, and people tell you that this is what you have to do to be healthy and to be fit and whatever. But yeah, at that point I just like I had no idea, because in my mind I was like, well, if you have a problem with alcohol, you stop drinking alcohol. If you have a problem with cigarettes, you stop smoking cigarettes. If you have a problem with food, what do? You can't stop eating food. That's another problem.
You have to dabble in the thing that is hard for you to interact with, but you like dabble as in because you have to eat every day, but you have to completely change your relationship with it.
Yeah, and it was like, how do I stop thinking about food when food is all around me and food has to be present in my life? And so for me, it was a lot of little choices over time when I felt like I'd messed up, being willing to say, okay, instead of doubling down, instead of correcting this and trying to control into the next day, accepting it and moving on. And I know that sounds like kind of like that sounds oversimplified, but that was something that I had to actively choose. And like I had these kind of like trigger habits that I'm like, oh no, like I need to double down on this. I need to like monitor things tomorrow or whatever, you know.
I don't even think that's simplified though, and I say that from a place that I completely relate. That's very similar to how I changed my relationship with food as well. And like a little bit of backstory, I don't want to steal your fire, Amy, at all, but I want to say like, no, I relate to that. Is I also had a disordered relationship with food for a lot of years. I think the entire time I was a junior athlete, so like 2014, I want to say through till 2018 for sure. Things started changing in 2018 when I moved here. But it was the exact same strategy. You were overthinking things. Now you have to stop thinking and you have to trust that those actions are going to help you in the long run. So when you were saying like it may be simple just to see it, accept it, and move on, is exactly what you have to do. Is just, hey, I don't want to eat this thing, but the nutritionist or I was told that this is good for me and this is actually a healthy decision, or I've been a bit more balanced and I made this decision when I wasn't in an emotional state. And when like I know this is good for me, I have to do it and I have to move on, because the more I marinate on it and the more I sit on it, the more I'm going to revert back to my old habits.
Yeah. It's like for me, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to get rid of all of my like food rules or food restrictions, whether that was like times of day when I was allowed, like the window of time that I was allowed to eat in, or like what kinds of foods were good versus bad.
The amount of sugar that you're allowed to be in the food, which is actually zero.
There's no good or bad foods. Your body doesn't recognize a glucose molecule different from a candy bar, like, you know,
it's just glucose,
piece of bread.
yeah, quite literally.
Anyway, but yeah, it wasn't removing all of the food rules. For me, it was like, okay, I'm still tracking all these things and I'm still controlling them. And if I fall out of the window and I feel that trigger of, oh God, I've messed up, I'm failing. It was me having to tell myself like, that's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. Tomorrow we try again, and leaving that day behind. Because what I would do is like, if I went over my calories for a certain day, I would take those calories off of the next day. What happens if you go 700 calories over your already underfed day and take it out of the next day? That's not a lot of food, you know, like, and it would keep kind of compounding. So for me, I had to say, okay, clean slate every day. And that's kind of where it started. And then kind of slowly building more of a trust around like what foods I can eat and when it's okay, you know, like it's okay to actually have fries or like these different foods that I labeled as bad in my head, and it's not gonna make or break things. And it was definitely a slow process. And even like during that time that I was kind of starting to figure it out, I like gained a lot of weight after high school. Part of it was probably because I was feeding myself enough that some hormones kicked in and allowed my body to finish going through puberty.
Huge.
But that was hard too, because no matter what you weigh, putting 20 pounds on your body in a few months and your clothes not fitting, it's hard.
That's hard. And it's
difficult.
It's hard mentally, but it's also hard on your body. All of a sudden your muscles are bigger, because if you're still lifting and you're eating more, you're going to gain muscle, but you're also going to gain some fat, which you needed to support the hormones and to support your body.
But then your ligaments and tendons got to catch up, and that's a whole
There's like
that's a
coordination,
whole other
huge, how you walk, how you move, and
Of
like
course.
even for me on like the most basic level, I was like, well, now all my favorite clothes don't fit. This sucks. Now I have to go buy new jeans. Like that sucks. I've had these jeans for
the
like
mental
7
and
years,
emotional aspect,
you know,
of course.
and being able to sit there and trust that that you're heading in the right direction, despite going in the opposite direction of everything that social media and social fitness culture is telling you. That's incredible. That's incredible that it would like trust that and stay strong to that.
I think it comes back full circle to what we were kind of saying earlier about just having that intuitive ability as an athlete to trust your body, and what we were kind of talking about as it pertains to like taking pre-workout before workouts, which for some people it works, by the way, like not demeaning it in any way, but like your brain quite literally makes note of what foods it has consumed in the past that made your body feel more fueled, it made it have more energy. And so, you know, like I don't know about you, Emma, but like as a runner, after I go on a long run, I always crave bread afterwards, because your body's like, I need to replenish that glycogen, need to replenish my carbohydrate stores. Like your body, when you have to honor your cravings, because those cravings are 9 out of 10 times telling you something about what you actually need. It isn't this guilt trip of, oh my God, I'm craving peanut butter. That means that I'm, you know, lazy about it. It's like, no, your body is giving you this cue because it wants what's best for you too. Like we don't give our body enough credit for how it's actually always working to support us, rather than, you know, derail us from our goals. It just, sometimes our idea of healthy is very different from what it actually needs to be internally at a physiological level.
You can't trick the body, you know, like the body is so smart.
But you can get very, very good at silencing those cues. So that you actually start to become not in tune with those cues at all. And so you actually, to the point where you can't even hear them, which I think is really common in people who have very, actually, no, I don't want to speak about this because I'm not a medical professional, but in personal experience, it's learning to listen to those cues compared to when I did not have a great relationship with food. It wasn't ever, this is what my body needs. This is what my mindset is telling me I need to consume. And I didn't even hear those or feel those cues at all. And there's also, there totally is a thing about like, we crave sugar all the time. It gives us hits of dopamine. Like, of course, we always want dessert, but knowing the difference between like, you know, those calories that your body is telling you need, and actually then balancing that with what knowledgeably you know for a fact is going to be healthy and nourishing to you. It's like finding that balance in there. But I totally agree. Like your body's going to tell you, I get these weird cravings for milk after working out, but it's cold and it's hydration and it's protein and it's carbs and it's great. And also you remember that, hey, I ate that and then I was energetic the rest of the day, or I felt satisfied afterwards. So am I going to eat that again? Like probably. I felt good afterwards.
It's so interesting because what I kind of perceived when I was in high school, I was definitely like under fueling for how fast my metabolism was working at the time. And then I'd come home at the end of the day and would almost like have like a binge where it did feel like kind of compulsive that I was eating all of this. And in my mind at that time, I was like, oh no, I lost control. I messed up. But
your
now,
body is just trying to make up for everything you were depriving it of earlier in the day.
I see that if I have a big feeding session, whatever, big meal, and I'm like just kind of eating everything in the house, I see it as, oh, I guess I didn't eat as much as I thought I did today, or oh, I guess I did do more exercise today, so like I burn more calories, because the body knows, like it's like that trust with the body that it's making up for those calories. And I think it's so interesting that like we try and resist that so much, like even the sugar cravings. A lot of times we crave sugar and high density foods when we have under fueled in the day or over the week over like a macro cycle. The body is looking for high density calories
because it's not properly taken care of. And I love what you mentioned there about instead of saying to yourself, I've lost control, it's analyzing, why am I so hungry right now?
Mhm.
Oh, let's look at this. Did I get enough
Yes,
protein and fat and
absolutely.
complex carbohydrates earlier in the day? It's not about this self-control and this lack of motivation and persistence to this diet that you're on.
Mhm.
It's a question, an honest, objective question with your body of, hey, am I taking care of you?
Yeah.
Or
absolutely.
did I not treat you as well as I should have today?
Yes. I'm curious to hear what, and I think this question encompasses the nutrition aspect, but also the kind of why you do what you do and stick to certain routines that pertain to your sport. Because I think that it's normal to normalize that these kinds of call it trip ups of like you get too lost in the performance aspect of your sport are still common even in when you're in the professional realm, right? Like in my experience, obviously I'm not competing right now at a national level like both of you are. For me, running and weightlifting is something that is way more recreational. It still has a purpose behind it. I run recreationally, I race recreationally, but it's been a very interesting shift for me because growing up, it was always organized sport and how you were training up to, with track, it was the summer was racing season. With gymnastics, it was the winter was competition season. So there was always this thing to work up to. But now as I guess a self-trained, self-directed athlete where I race when I want, I do fitness because it supports me, because it makes me happy. There's been a lot of times where I've had to revisit my why. So for example, I had this moment like maybe like last week or 2 weeks ago. I recently, decided that I want to race more come the spring in like local races like the TC 10K and the BMO marathon or half marathon. And I've decided to kind of tailor my weight training at the gym to kind of suit running. So incorporating a bit less I guess like decreasing the weight and adding more like power based exercises, for example. Again, just to switch it up because I think that's always fun too. But I remember I had to miss the gym one morning because I had to do homework instead. Like I wouldn't have time to catch up during the day. And I went into this panic of like, oh my God, I'm going to miss leg day. Like I was like, why? Like I thought I had shifted out of this mindset. And then as I did I started asking the whys to get to the root of it. It was very interesting for me to find that the underlying cause was like, oh my gosh, I miss a day of lifting. That means one less day of deadlifts. That means one less day of getting bigger. And then I was like, it was a really good check-in to be like, okay, like this is still here, which is okay. It happens. It's a societal conditioning. Like it happens. But I think it's really good to revisit that. And it happens at times in your journey as an athlete because, as much as you've shifted into a healthier place, those societal reinforcers are always around us, right? So, all that to say, like, where are you at now with that? And if you experience it still, how do you shift out of that mindset and out of that guilt?
Man. I
That
almost
was
want
loaded.
to,
I know.
that's okay. Yeah. I almost want to go, I'm even in a transition period of even coming back to a place where I would even feel that guilt. And this is actually going a bit back. I feel like I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, but I'll get back to the question.
Go for it.
Anyways, when I say that I'm even coming back to a place where I would even feel that guilt is because it's only been, I would say, in the last 2 or 3 months of training that I decided I actually wanted to race for myself again. Going back circa 2020, before COVID even happened, I was in a place in training and sport. This is when I was still training as an elite athlete in the Olympic pathway rather as opposed to the paratriathlon pathway. And I was still competing for myself, but I was so burnt out. The training environment wasn't right for me. And I ended up moving on from that training environment. And I was in a few months of, hey, I'm kind of still exercising, but I don't really know where I'm going. And that's when paratriathlon came knocking and asked me if I wanted to come on as a guide. And there's a lot more to unpack in terms of, which I probably won't go into today, of like where I was at and what led up to that major burnout that I had. But essentially what paratriathlon offered me was an opportunity to still stay in the sport, which I had this deep down gut feeling that I wasn't done in the sport, but I also had zero motivation to race for myself. And I had zero belief in myself that I could even handle the training because those last 2 years had been injuries and illness every 3 or 4 months. And I was at this point where I was like, my body just can't handle it. I don't have what it takes to be a professional athlete. Done and done. And I was done. But I was like, but I still like triathlon though. So paratriathlon was like, hey, you can do reduced training hours compared to what you did before. You can function as a guide. And I was like, awesome. I still get to do the sport, but I don't have to race for myself because I don't want nothing to do with that. So then the shift from, there was no guilt around myself because I wasn't racing for me anymore. It was racing to be the best guide I could be. But it was in a very balanced way where
there's a lot more freedom for enjoyment rather than just the training and the suffering.
And intuition with the body too.
Yeah, I think, well, yeah. And she had this understanding that there's a plan, but just because you write a plan doesn't mean you're actually going to be able to execute the plan, or your body's going to be ready to execute the plan. And so you're aware of that and you're aware of how your body is feeling, and then you adjust and do the best that you can to still stay within this bigger goal that you have. And this bigger goal that you have is, if it's September, that bigger goal that you have is March. It's the race that you're doing. But right now you're in November, December in the depths of training. And as long as you get in within a percentage of this plan that you have, you don't have to hit it exactly where you're at. Maybe you're at 115%, maybe you're at 85%. But over time, it's eventually going to average out. And so I think having that balance there really, really helped. But then now I've gone through 2 years of training and actually have functioned better as an athlete, haven't been sick and injured every 3 or 4 months because of this shift in the focus of training. And I'm actually at a place now where I'm like, no, I want to race for myself again. And it's wonderful, but it's come out of that place of balance and understanding that the body can only handle what the body can handle, and no amount of forcing it is going to change that.
Yeah.
So kind of hitting rock bottom to them come up, which
sometimes
has some of us have to learn the hard way. What can you do?
It kind of sucks.
What can
but
you do?
Then you're like,
but
hey.
it's awesome to hear that it's possible to get to that place after getting so low.
Yeah, where you're like, I literally don't even want to be an elite athlete anymore, when my identity had been for the past 4 years, so 2014 through to 2020, so 6 years of like, I want to race on the national team. From going from that to, I don't even want to race anymore. Like, and so to be able to kind of come back and find that balance again, and find that love of the sport again, and find that trust in my own body. Like, so I say that I don't really feel that guilt anymore because of this, just the balanced mindset that my coach has been able to foster in our training environment, where it's like, hey, you're tired, you're fatigued, your schoolwork's a lot. I randomly rolled my ankle on Thursday, and so I had to.
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I was
no, it was gross. It's bruised.
I only laughed because I heard that you were carried home.
I was carried home. Lovely boyfriend did carry me home.
Yeah. What are they for?
Seriously. I know. And he tells me not to run with my phone. And I'm like, I'm gonna run with my phone because if I roll my ankle, I'm gonna need to call you.
Exactly. If you're listening and have a partner, write that down.
Anyways, but as a result of that, like, we had to modify the swim workout the following day. I had to cut an hour off of my long ride. I couldn't do my long run on Sunday, but I'm still confident. I'm like, I'm also not in race season right now. So that helps. And so I go, I don't actually need to be hitting XYZ because race season is in March and it's November perspective here. What's the bigger picture? So it's okay right now. Exactly. I'd probably be a bit more stressed if that happened 3 weeks out of race day.
Yeah.
Of course.
But it didn't.
You're going to trust that, like, your body is still going to perform when it needs to.
Yes.
You know, like, I think it's interesting because kind of in the fitness industry and like in this kind of like motivational mindset, kind of on the more toxic end of that kind of messaging, it says like, oh, you're tired, you're fatigued, and your body wants to stop. You need to push harder. You need to have more
like,
mental
to
toughness.
Suck.
Yeah, it's like you need to give even more than you can than you can normally give in order to force the body to do this. And you can't, like, it doesn't work. And I think maybe for people who are just beginning, maybe they need more of that motivation because they don't understand what capacity your body can go up to. But what's interesting about athletes is that it's quite the opposite a lot of times with training them. If you're, doing it well, athletes are really good at pushing their body to its actual limit, not like a perceived limit. And so more oftentimes training athletes is asking them to back off and to controlling know when to listen to that. And it's interesting seeing that in like a strength and conditioning aspect too, like learning about that is that, I always had this idea of like, athletes are like more physically fit in this sport, so it's easier for them. It's not as hard on their body, but it's actually the opposite, that athletes are able to unlock a certain higher intensity that's experienced by their body. Like on a neural level, their body is able to unlock a higher intensity. So it's actually harder on their body than somebody who's a novice. And let's say like all the different proportions of their body is the same, but athletes are actually able to
put more
reach
on
these higher capacities. So it actually adds more fatigue. It's not easier for them. It's much harder.
Absolutely. And mentally, you have the experience and the training. And I think mental strength flows, even ebbs and flows within the season. At least I find it does. I don't want to call it getting soft, but I get less mentally able to cope with high levels of discomfort during like off seasons from training. When we get into race season, we start doing really high intensity training again. I become, I slowly kind of build up that mental tolerance again, but it happens. And if you have this higher mental tolerance to be in a really uncomfortable place, putting out a whole lot of work. And so, sometimes the coach does need to tell the athlete like, hey, you don't need to go there today.
Well, and that's good that you like your brain needs that level of offloading as well, not just your body. Like you can't be in this fight or flight stress mode. I need to perform 100% at all times because your mental state gets fatigued too. And that's probably what you hit with like 2020 kind of triathlon. Emma. Like that was like, because you're at this point that your body's also, starting to give out. But mentally you're like, I don't even want to do this anymore. I don't love this. I'm not finding any joy in it. That's like that mental fatigue where you just get tired of being on at all times.
I feel like it becomes what you said there. I can see how it transitioned into, and I think this is a problem for a lot of people in athletics, how it becomes this way more performance-based thing, especially when you're in professional sport, because you're getting paid to output this certain result all the time, and that takes away from the fun of the sport, and it just becomes this constant game of suffering. And I think that is also a really good transition into this very different question, which is obviously, we just touched on how you don't want to be suffering all the time. And I think that it's difficult because I feel like we glorify suffering and we make it this threshold and this is how you validate that you have worked hard. But suffering, like what dictates suffering? Is it like your lactate burn at the end of a sprint? Or is it like, are you puking after a workout? All that to say, obviously as an athlete, you do have to reach a level of discomfort during your workouts and during your training that is at the right intensity. And I feel like we kind of, if I'm thinking from a more personal growth mindset here, there's like the two poles of, I guess, self-care, right? Like there's the self-care that is like bubble baths and wine, and then there's the other pole which is always suffering, and it's you don't make time for anything but physical and mental challenges.
It's like this, there's been this polarization in society of like the grinders and then people being like, oh no, self-love, you're feeling down today, go eat some chocolate.
And it's the same. I think it's the same in athletics. Like, a lot of parents don't put their kid in sport because I don't want them to suffer. Like, I don't want them to
experience comparison, experience competition, because
they don't set them up. They set them up to succeed, not fail. And so as an athlete, what is that like? What does that relationship with discomfort look like for you? And how do you gauge that bar of, oh, am I sitting at a comfortable level of discomfort that is not going to hinder my process?
Yeah.
Progress. Sorry.
Yeah.
Progress.
Right off the bat, I just go at like timelines here. Where are you in the grand scheme of what you're doing? If you're in well, I'll go back to like more like global and bring it back to a bit more micro, but like, you know, big training block, you're doing strength, big aerobic base, at least that's what we do in endurance sports. You're going to feel down in the dumps a little bit. We're putting on muscle, we're putting on aerobic base, you're doing lots of hours. You're supposed to feel kind of shitty. Not to the point where you're actually getting sick or getting injured or getting burnt out, but you're not going to feel great. Versus in race season, no, we're upping intensity, but we're lowering volumes. You want to feel a little bit more snappy and sharp. So with those things, I'm just alluding to like, what's the season? Where, if you have a broad perspective, where are you supposed to be in energy wise? But on a more day-to-day scale, it's like, there you have natural ebb and flows every day and within the week in terms of, oh yeah, I had a good sleep last night, things are going well in school and relationships and everything, and I'm having a good day and I'm vibing. And then there's days where you're just tired, not as good as sleep, maybe there's a bit higher stress, or I don't know, your hormones are flying and you're just not having a great day, but the next day you come back up. And I think there's a bit of a culture that's kind of starting around anytime you feel down, it's this thing to be avoided and this thing that you're like, oh no, I need to really take care of myself. And like, sorry, I don't want to get into a voice and start mocking it because I don't want to be like mocking.
No, but you're allowed to have an opinion. You're allowed to have an opinion.
You know, it's kind of almost being a little bit too soft around, you can have bad days, because if you're having that bad day, but you're not at risk for a sickness, injury, burnout, and it's been like one bad day, like, you're fine. You can push through that. You can learn how to refocus, and you can show yourself that you are okay to feel not, it's okay to not be okay for a little bit. It's when that not okay becomes chronic, weeks at a time, multiple days, then I think you start asking the questions of, hey, like, why am I feeling this way? This should not be occurring multiple days in a row. What's going on? And then that's when I kind of go like, let's take a step back. But micromanaging within the day, that's where I think things get a little bit too touchy.
It's
I don't know, that's my opinion.
No, I hear you. I think it's like the balance of it's the difference between like mental and the physical threshold, I want to say. Like, I'm trying to find a right way to word it, but like you said, you had a bad day, but you're not at physical risk for injury or having like poor recovery.
Honestly, mental risk either. You're just a little bit down in the dumps today.
Like that's a mental check that you come back to. But it's when, like you said, you start seeing decreased progress, like you're feeling fatigued. That's when
like over time,
you've hit the physical. It's not so much like you're just being weak and you're being lazy. It's like, okay, no, now you need to listen to your body.
Like, yeah, I know you're chronically overworking yourself now.
Point. Yeah.
But if it's just like transient and like a day or two, it's like, okay, cool, like move on.
Yeah, of course.
I think also like if it's like you can kind of monitor what that looks like. If it's a really bad day, it's like, okay, can I push training to tomorrow, or can I do the bare minimum today? And then tomorrow, the next day, I can do a bit more, like I can handle that.
Totally.
I think it's finding the balance between like discipline out of self-love and then rather than kind of just never denying yourself any indulgence, any comfort, you know?
Yeah. And if you do need that chocolate at the end of the bad day, like I have chocolate at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if it's a good day or a bad day. I love chocolate, you know? But I think, it's just when you like are using that to be like, oh, I need to not do any homework tonight because I'm too stressed. It's like, actually, maybe doing that homework would make you less stressed because then you got it done.
Yeah, and I think about it,
you know?
Absolutely. I like to think about it as like loving self-discipline in the sense that like a parent, like a parent-child relationship, like a good parent disciplines their kid. Yeah. There's kind of two sides. There's the permissive parent that doesn't do anything, lets their kid kind of do everything, but then the kid has no regulation. They don't really feel like their parents really care.
There's no organization. There's no motivation. There's no getting through the hard stuff.
There's also like this authoritarian parent that is like discipline, like exceptionally strict, discipline for the sake of discipline without any responsiveness to that child's needs and their ebbs and flows. That's also not a good picture of a parent, but there's this what is it? Authoritarian.
Authoritarian.
One of
Yeah.
those. That,
Dictator.
there's discipline, but there's responsiveness and interaction with that child, and that it's coming from a place of love. And I like to think of my relationship to myself in the same way.
Love that.
Where like self-love is discipline at times. It's also
absolutely.
listening in and like allowing for modifications and adjustments as needed.
Yeah.
And
like, is that day off necessary, or is doing these things and getting these tasks done actually going to help me more, even though it might be a bit hard?
It's like am I giving into like a short-term comfort right now that in the long run is actually going to hinder me? Like,
absolutely.
like if I sleep in until the very last minute, am I not gonna properly fuel and get ready for my day, and that's gonna
hinder that day,
throw off my day? Yes. But if I need to take in a bit more sleep or something like that, in a way that it isn't going to throw off future Amy, I like to think of it in that term as well, where I'm like, can I take in some more indulgence that it's actually going to benefit me? That's going to be good. But I want to set up future Amy for success, and whether that's resting so that she can perform better, or whether that's getting things done despite not having the motivation to today. Either way, I'm thinking about what is future Amy going to thank me for today, and like that looks different. It's like the listening in of what does that look like.
I love also taking that perspective and like, or that mindset, and zooming out from like your current emotional state, which that is completely valid and needs to be heeded, of course. But I love that, taking a step back and going, okay, so let's take into consideration everything that's going on right now, and how am I actually doing, like at a micro level and from a zoomed out perspective of like, I love that framework.
And I think that discipline also, that kind of, I love that you phrased it from that kind of parent-child self-love aspect, because I also think that plays such a part in, as an athlete and as a human in general, like making sure that your consistency is there in the routines that set you up for success, right? Like for me, I loathe nothing more than having to stretch at the end of the day. But I've also learned that I have to maintain my performance and to prevent injury, right? Because as a runner, it's huge to stretch and to have mobility and everything. And for me, my non-negotiable is I have to at least foam roll at the end of the day and do my physio exercises, because that will ensure, like you said, that long-term performance. Instead, if I skip it today, maybe once it's okay, but skipping it more than on one day because I'm like, I'm lazy, or like I just don't feel like it, or like it compounds. And I think that that's also huge for saying, well, just because you don't feel like it today, you're gonna feel it later. If you don't do it. So I hear you, because it comes down to not just in the when you're training, when you're in the playing field, it comes down to what you do outside of training as well that impacts your performance.
And what I was thinking of too was when you kind of said those kind of two pillars between like the like indulgence and the discipline. Like I was talking to a friend a little while ago, like probably last week, and we were watching one of like the David Goggins kind of more well-known talks, and it was very comedic to us because like just his motivational kind of take on things. It's very much framed as this inspirational, motivational. It's got like all the music behind it and all these people like working out and stuff. It's
love that.
Very interesting. But one thing he says that really just like stuck with me that I thought was so backwards was like, he was like, you wake up and there's two voices. Everyone has two voices in their mind. One is the coddling voice when it says, just sleep in, just have that extra like food, just like kind of give in, it's not worth it. Just give in to these comforts. And then you have this demon voice that says, you're not fucking good enough. You're going to get up. You're going to put in the work. You are not worth it. You got to prove yourself. You got to earn this. And I was like, no. That is the same voice. And both of them are coming from a place of self-loathing or self-contradicting. Because one of them is saying, just give in. You're not worth putting in the work. to achieve what you actually want to achieve. The other one
that's
says
the coddling voice.
Yes, that's the coddling. And
You're
then we have
not
this,
worth it.
you know, so-called demon voice or whatever he called it. And he says, you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. You need to constantly prove yourself in order to prove your worth. Both of them are saying the same thing, that you are not worth it. And there's a third voice, or rather a second voice, if those two are the same. There's this other voice that comes from self-love. And that voice expresses both camps. So that voice says some days, you know, hey, actually we've been putting in a lot of work, and if you really need the rest, that's okay, because your worth is not defined by your output, by your productivity, your performance. Today, it's okay to put in a little less, because, you know, you can trust that you're still worthy, right? That's it'll say that sometimes. And then other times that voice is going to say, actually, no, we're going to not give into these comforts. And even though we don't want to put in this work, we are worth putting the work in. And I think like
it's so much more empowering of a perspective rather than a hateful, negatively connotated perspective, which I know there's definitely some people who feel alive and awakened by this like really negative perspective, but
you can get things done on that for sure.
Yeah, it's attacking and it's aggressive though, and it breaks you down over time. And my big question is that sustainable?
It's never sustainable. And you find that you get to those achievements and you can't relish in them. You can't celebrate them.
You got them.
Never been enough in the first place.
No.
Well, and also you perceive success to be suffering.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge too. Like, I love that you characterized it as only one voice, because I think that the moment that you split yourself into, there's this lazier part of me and there's this badass part of me, and that's the one I want to be, you automatically shun the part of you that is trying to take care of you, that you perceive to be this like separate part of you. And then that intuition, when it's coming through and telling you, hey, like, slow down today, and then you shun it, like, it's working at that intensity that you shouldn't be working at all the time, because you're going to increase your chance of injury. But also you start resenting yourself, and it becomes this thing of, it's never enough because I must always be suffering, and if I'm not always suffering, then I did not perform.
I'm giving in.
It's horrible.
That softness. But like,
and once you reach that high level or that achievement, that like if you do reach it, if you win that race or hit that lift or get that test score, it's like, was it enough?
It's never enough.
No, it wasn't. And you also got there in a place of hate.
And one thing
is that fulfilling?
Like, one thing I was even kind of
tell us in the comments below.
Yes,
what did you achieve with self-hate that you were really proud of, that you were really happy about, that made you feel good?
How did you actually feel when you achieved that? You were like, hot damn, or you were like, well, now I need to go be better and reach the next thing. That's not bad, but also absorb that success.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, one thing I was even kind of like reading in Brianna Wiest, her book, she was saying, like, talking about like a fulfilling life, and she was like, you know, all these achievements, winning that race, you know, getting that job, buying that car, whatever, those are products of your life. They are not the goals of life. The goal is to be fulfilled, is to feel fulfilled. And so if your process of getting to those milestones is not fulfilling to you, then you're not going to be fulfilled when you hit those goals. They are the products of a fulfilled life, whatever that looks like for you. They're not the pursuit. They're not the thing that makes it happen.
I love that.
And I've been thinking about that for just like days.
It's a great check-in to have with yourself. And I want to know, if I guess we've talked about kind of what it can look like to avoid that, to kind of like be at that threshold. I want to know for each of you, when you're in training, what that feels like at the mental and physical level. Like, how do you know, how do you check in with yourself to be like, okay, I am a little bit uncomfortable right now. This is an okay place to stay because this is bringing gains, right? Rather than, okay, now I'm at my limit, like, I know I'm here kind of thing. Like, what does that mental process of checking in with yourself look like?
Honestly, I usually make that decision before the training session even starts. because especially if you're doing those high intensity lifts or those high intensity really hard swim sets or run sets, you're going to get probably through the first rep and be like, well, holy shit, you know, like, I don't know. But if you have any sort of like, when you're doing those hard things, if you have any sort of doubt, you need to not shun it, but you need to kind of just stay in the moment and trust yourself that you're going to make it through. If you start feeling like a sharp pain, of course, that's some sort of like acute injury, like, okay, stop. But I think if you've made the thoughtful decision beforehand to start that workout, you've also made the decision that you're capable of it, or you're in a place where you're capable of attempting it, but you're not at this risk where this injury or illness risk. I know I keep bringing that up, but those are the biggest indicators kind of thing. Yeah. And of course, like acute sharp pain, don't continue. But in terms of energy or the pain threshold of like just building up, and this discomfort threshold is probably a better word for it. Like, nah, you made that decision going in, time to go for it. Yeah. Of course.
And there's nothing wrong with, I think I heard a triathlete talk about this on a podcast recently too, where she was like, we shame quitting so much, but if you quit in the middle of your workout and it meant that you had adequate recovery, that you got back into the game the next day or the day after, would it be worth it instead of not quitting and then being out for a week or two, you know, because it led to injury or whatever. Fair. So I think that it comes back to are you checking in with yourself and being honest with the level of capacity that you're at? Or are you so worried about performance that you are willing to put in the risk of injury, of illness, just to perform this one time when you could perform 10 other times?
Yeah. You know? And I think from the athlete perspective, though, that's really hard. Of course. Because if you're in the middle of that workout, like you're going to want to quit.
Of course. Yeah.
But, and then so I think it's something that is a balance that's really, really hard to find in yourself. And that's where having training partners, or not even training partner, a coach that knows you and is observant and knows when to call it, because you as the athlete, you need to be like, I'm going for it. Because that's what race day looks like. That's what performance day looks like. That is going deep to the ends of your abilities. And you do need to practice that to a certain extent in the hard workouts.
For sure.
But yeah, I 100% agree with that. Of like, if doing those last few reps is going to set you back where you can't even train for the next week, no, don't do it. But finding that is either a really, really deep sense of self and knowledge about self, or it's a coach who is monitoring you.
Yeah. I found like with my training, I have a lot of flexibility to move things around. So for me, I'm monitoring like how recovered my body feels before I'm going into a session, because if I only have 3 or 4 sessions in a week, I can easily space them out an extra day or whatever if I need that extra recovery, and I can move that around. I think I've almost come to a point where I need to be a little more okay with not being fully recovered and going into some sessions with fatigue, even though I may not perform as well if I just did it the next day. Have to be okay with that, especially during certain like seasons of prep. But like even with like kind of my training, I have like a range of what lifts I'm going to hit. So maybe it's like 10 to 20 pounds difference. And my coach is just like, yeah, if you're feeling like shit and you need to just get it done today, take the lower end of the range for your top set of like, you know, squat, bench, deadlift or whatever. If you're feeling pumped, if the warm-up sets are moving nice, they're moving smooth, then take the higher end. And for me, a lot of times it is like something that I still battle with. I'm always like, well, I'm going to take the higher end. I'm going to always take as much as I can. But, you know, like becoming more mindful in the body and being like, actually, yeah, I'm still feeling more fatigued. Actually, yeah, I can take this lower end. And it's not, I'm not giving in, quote unquote. I'm not quitting. I'm not like not giving it my all. I'm being smart about my training. And it's like, yeah, I think there's a bit more wiggle room with that kind of thing. And we're also like tracking like rate of perceived exertion. So it's like, if this lift should feel like a 6 out of 10, don't make it a 9 out of 10. That's not smart. That's not what we're looking for, because we're trying to offset fatigue as much as possible. And the more intensity we have, the more or volume we we're going to add more fatigue, and we don't want to overdo that, or we're not going to see any adaptation. So like kind of I've been with working with this coach, I've become a lot more intuitive with my body of like, how are those warm-up sets feeling? Yeah. Are my legs like really tired, or are they fresh and ready to go? How did that last set move? That felt really good. Okay, yeah, I'm good to go. And like and kind of coming more in tune with like, how did that feel? Was that an 8? Am I actually going to push like an 8 out of 10, or is this me maxing out and just not wanting to admit it to myself? So like, yeah, I've started to kind of feel what those different intensities feel like.
Yeah, and it takes time and a lot of learning, but
Totally.
the key point that I really loved there was like intention with intensity.
Yeah. I know. I was going to say, I feel like it keeps coming back full circle to, it's all about trusting yourself and your body and your intuitive cues that are telling you like, you can push it harder, or you should dial it back today. Like, I emphasize this because I think it's so important. Like, I feel like we tend to think that our body is always working against us when it is fatigued, or it's like telling us to dial it back, but it's working in our favor. It just knows how best to get there better than we do, you know? Alrighty, well, that was incredible. I feel like we talked about everything and more that I expected, but as is the tradition on the Commitment to Growth podcast, every guest, including when there's 2, gets a rapid fire round of 3 questions asked, where you have to give the answer in a sentence or less. The first 2 questions are the same for every guest, and the last one is unique to whoever I have on today. So, are y'all ready?
Already.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Let's go.
Sentence or less.
Alrighty.
Okay.
The first question is, what is your favorite quote? And silence.
Okay.
That's okay.
Okay, first, I have lots of quotes. First one comes to mind is discipline equals freedom.
Oh, snap. Okay, Amy.
Oh, okay. At first I was like, the first one that came to mind was, I'm like, this doesn't apply at all, but maybe it does. The opposite of love is indifference. It's from a Lumineers song. I know.
Whoa,
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Thoughts.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to marinate on that. I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, your second question is, what song is currently stuck in your head?
Oh, man.
They're called
What
rapid
song
fire for a
was?
reason.
I
You
know.
gotta
This is
answer what
okay.
first comes to mind.
What's Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush?
Oh,
I know. I'm
God.
so sorry, but like not.
No, don't be.
Not
No,
what was
good.
it?
So
Yeah.
applicable.
Yeah,
so applicable.
Stranger Things has been running strong through my brain. Even though I finished
Nice.
watching it like 3 months ago, I still love that song. But
Nice.
okay.
We love it.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
I Want to Be a Cowboy Baby by CIT. Such a good song.
Oh my gosh.
Oh
Alright,
my God.
Dance You Kitchen
Now
Elsa.
you all know what to listen to get hyped up after this.
Oh.
Alrighty, and your third and final question is, say you are in a park somewhere unexpected, and somebody comes up to you, complete novice. They're like, hey, I'm trying to get into athletics. Like, I want to be an athlete. What would you tell them that it means to be an athlete?
What it means.
What it means to be an athlete.
Ooh, okay, actually, I think I can take this one. I think you are an athlete when you train for performance outcomes. That's like as simple as it is. When going to the gym, when exercise, when whatever you're doing is not just leisure, or I know this is more than one sentence, but yeah,
Okay.
more than just leisure or health, you're training for a goal or for a performance, you're an athlete.
I love that.
And one more thing to add. I think that was really helpful in considering myself an athlete, because for a long time I didn't. So
I love that. All right, Emma.
I don't know if I can top that. I think it's totally
It's
accurate.
not about topping. It's
Not
very
topping, not
specific.
topping, or even to like elaborate on that. Yeah, you're an athlete when you're fighting for something.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, ladies, this was fantastic and long overdue. I am so grateful for both of you. In case the listeners didn't know, these are two of the most incredible women in my life, and I'm so grateful for them every single day.
Mary's the most incredible woman in my life. Thank you too.
Oh my god, thank you. Where can people find both of you after this?
Ooh, catch me at the McKinnon building at UVic.
Your social media.
No, I know. Yeah. No, I know you meant social media, but I was like, nah, find me in the concussion lab. Anyways, little drop there. Anyways, no. Follow me on Instagram. You're gonna tag me in this post, of course. But
Yes.
Emma Louise Louise.s. It's really punctuation heavy, so sorry guys. Emma Skaug on Facebook. I do have an appearance on Twitter, but I'm pretty sure it's a picture of when I was like 12, so don't go there.
Nice.
Alternatively, you can find her on the cover of Triathlon Canada. And Amy.
Oh, wait. Catch me on LinkedIn, Emma Skaug.
Real talk.
Real professional talk. Yeah. Okay. Amy.
Don't find me. I'm hiding.
We want to see
I just really want to say something funny after I did. I'm also on the Instagram, Amy with 2Ys.Jean, I think. And then if you want to watch my shitty form videos put to music, I have Amy Likes number 2 lift, and that's where we've got more of the training updates, and I like to make silly reels with all my training videos.
Yes, they both post incredibly motivational content, so don't miss it. They will be both tagged at the bottom of this post if you want to see more, if you're as in love with them as I am. And thank you for being here. I love you both, and we'll chat soon. I hope.
Yes. Thanks, man.
Wonderful. Thanks for having us.
How was that for a stimulating, passionate, motivating conversation on fitness, everybody? I hope you loved this conversation as much as I did, and I hope that you are as in love with Amy as Emma as I am. They're pretty hard not to fall deeply in love with after hearing them around for even the first time. So all that to say, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in this week. I hope that this conversation helped you as much as it helped me, and I hope that moving forward in athletics, you will give yourself the permission to enjoy it and to relish what it is there to give you, which is so much more than suffering and results. And of course, all of that is exciting, but it is also about the journey that you take through fitness towards yourself and towards discovering what you are capable of. So, all that being said, thank you for being here again this week, and I hope you enjoyed that. If you want more regular updates on the podcast episodes, you can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram. It's at Commitment to Growth Podcast, and you can also check out the main platform, which is at Commitment to Growth, which is my personal training and personal growth platform that I am using to bridge the worlds of fitness and personal growth together to give you more holistic health and a more holistic approach to health at that. If you haven't had enough of me on these episodes yet, you can also register to be on the Commitment to Growth newsletter, which is a weekly, bi-weekly, depending on the week, newsletter that I send out with wellness resources and some quotes and some perspective shifters for you to consider, so you can hear more from me and get some more stimulating information resources for personal growth for your own journey, supplied by yours truly. And if you want to have any questions about the episode, you want to be a guest on it, you can DM me right on Instagram, or you can email me. It's at commitmenttogrowthpod@gmail.com, and I would be more than happy to stir up some conversation with you there. I believe that is everything for this week. Again, your presence is so appreciated here. I love you all so, so much, and I will see you in the next episode.